Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Comprehensivist Wednesday that we do in collaboration with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Today, we're delighted to have Dr. Rick Lippin. He's a global leader in art medicine since 1980s. So he gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago. Everybody loved it, so we're delighted to have him back. Rick, take it away. So let me just tell you, give me just a second. Folks, let me tell you the format. So Rick is going to present on art and medicine, or art as a healing agent. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms to discuss everything that Rick has said behind his back, not behind his back, but together with him. And then we're going to come back to talk about our takeaways, what did we learn, and ask questions. So that's the format. Rick, floor is yours.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. And thank you, Shrikant, for hosting and helping me get through this. We have 2 hours together tonight, and I'm going to speak about one of my favorite topics, which is the links between the creative arts and the healing arts, or what I called in a paper that I wrote, arts medicine. More specifically, rather than the entire issue of all the relationships between arts and medicine, I'm going to speak tonight about the healing power of arts. By way of background, I did not come from an arts family. I was not trained formally in the arts. However, as a young child, I was very enamored with the beauty of nature. I even wrote an essay about the beauty of earthworms, of all things. I began to realize when I was very young that I very much appreciated natural beauty. And when I went to medical school, and which is a fairly stressful experience for all medical students, I began to realize that I was interested in the arts, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. I noticed that I fell in love with medical lexicon, the language of medicine, the beautiful language of medicine. So instead of learning all the language in a linear manner, I fell in love with the aesthetics of medical language. For example, the word oophoron. The word oophoron is a majestic word, which is the word in Latin or in medicine for ovary. And I fell in love with words like that in medical school. Another onomatopoetic word is borborygmus, which is the sound of gas going through the gastrointestinal tract. And I said, oh my God, this is terrific. I'm falling in love with language. And I'll use another word, which is sort of morbid and harsh and gloomy, and that's cachexia. And that's the word for an end-stage cancer patient who has lost a lot of weight, who looks thin, who looks very sick, and is about to die. And that word is cachexia. Anyway, I began to realize that while I had to learn what these words meant literally in order to pass my exams, from an aesthetic standpoint, I started to fall in love with language, with medical language. And if you read medical textbooks, you'll see what I mean. The other thing that I noticed in medical school is the way I learned anatomy, human anatomy, is that I looked at the relationships between the muscles and the bones and the arteries and nerves. And I studied anatomy through a visual means, not through a linear memorizing. This muscle is attached to this tendon, is attached to this nerve, is attached to this artery. So even from a visual standpoint, I started to fall in love. I became very interested in how the human body appeared from a visual art standpoint. So, and also it helped me when I began to realize that some aspects of medical education had artistic qualities. It helped me with coping with the stress of medical school. Anyway, this I graduated from medical school in 1971. And in 1976, I founded the American Physicians Poetry Association, or APPA, American Physicians Poetry Association. And I was able to communicate with about 300 so-called physician poets. Most of them were amateurs, but they loved language, they loved words, they realized the importance of words to them as doctors and the importance of words that they spoke to patients in medicine. And I had a great time meeting these doctors. We usually communicated through internet. We published a newsletter. We published each other's poems. Very few were what I would call accomplished poets. One of the most famous poets of all, you may know, was William Carlos Williams, who practiced pediatrics in Rutherford, New Jersey. And he was viewed by many as the father of avant-garde poetry. That would be William Carlos Williams, who actually wrote poems between seeing patients in Rutherford, New Jersey. Anyway, I had a great time. That was my first interest in the arts, poetry. And it's interesting that that was my first interest because all the other of the arts, visual arts, dance, music, sculpting, all of the other arts are nonverbal. Poetry is verbal, although some poets would argue that you can appreciate poetry without understanding the content. You could actually appreciate poetry from the standpoint of the shapes of the words, the sounds of the words, the rhythm of the poem, whether you're reading the poem or you're listening to the poem. Anyway, that was my first venture into arts and medicine. I founded this poetry association, and to this day, I still keep in touch with some of these doctors who love to write poetry. In 1985, moving ahead about 9 years, I said, well, why just stop at poetry? Why not link arts people, creative arts people with medical people? And I founded the International Arts Medicine Association, or the word IAMA, International Arts Medicine Association. And I was looking at all the relationships between medicine and the arts, the healing arts and the creative arts. And there are many relationships. Today, we'll talk about the creative arts therapies, or the capacity for the arts to heal. But I discovered when I founded IAMA, the International Arts Medicine Association, that these two communities, the arts community and the medical community, didn't communicate very much with each other. So all I really did was provide a forum for them to interact with each other. And they were very appreciative. Some were territorial. Some said, oh no, we're artists. We don't want to get involved in medicine. Or some said in medicine, what are you talking about, arts and medicine? We have other therapies that are much more effective. But generally, people were very appreciative that I was able to provide an opportunity for them to link up with each other. And I kept that going for about 15 years at the International Arts Medicine Association. I had the opportunity to speak in all over the world, actually, on this topic. I made a speech in Tokyo. I spoke in Bangkok, Thailand. I was invited to speak in Sydney, Australia, which was a wonderful experience. And I had 2 presentations in Israel, one in Jerusalem and one in Tel Aviv. And of course, many presentations in the United States, but I wanted to highlight the fact that I had an opportunity to move this arts medicine leadership into a global community. And it was just an incredibly enriching experience for me. And I think people appreciated the fact that someone was trying to get these two communities to talk to each other. Now, that's my introduction, Shrikant and others. Let's get to the topic at hand. And that is the healing power of the arts. Let me start out by saying that there are some scholars who actually believe that we sang before we spoke. You know, I won't get into the scholarship there, but there are some scholars who believe that we actually danced before we walked. I'm not so sure of that, but the healing power of the arts has been known, obviously, since antiquity. Even Plato himself said, it's very dangerous to allow the wrong kind of music into the Republic. referring, of course, to Plato's Republic. The arts therapies can impact physiology, whether it's movement, dance, the visual arts, painting, other art forms, sculpture, drama. They all have health-giving properties. And one of the reasons why we can brag that this is an opportunity more so than ever is that the arts represent an alternative to the excesses of the miracles, I call it, of pharmacology. Medicine has been dominated, as we all know, in the past at least 50, maybe 100 years by pharmacology, by drugs and surgery. But like so many wonderful things, when taken to excess, these interventions backfire. And therefore, energy medicine is beginning to reemerge in addition to biology and pharmacology. So the arts obviously represent energy. If you're exposed to a piece of music, that's energy moving into your body. If you're exposed to a color, that is an energy flowing into your body. And I wanted to emphasize that arts experiences can either be passive, you can be in an audience, or you can be standing before a painting in an art museum, or you can be watching a dance on a stage where you're the passive audience, or even better, you can be involved in the arts actively, where you yourself, Shrikant, and others on the line create your own music, create your own dance, create your own poetry, create your own painting, et cetera, et cetera. So there's passive arts therapy and there's active arts therapy. You know, the simple concept, even before the creative arts therapies took off after World War II, and I'll explain that in a minute, but the simple concept, what I'm reminded of is how workers, probably since the dawn of man, to make work a little bit less stressful, they sang. So the Welsh sang in the coal mines. The slaves sang in the cotton fields and after work in their homes, in their slave huts. So these are just very common sense examples of man's natural tendency to use song, for example, as a way to reduce stress. Hence, it has a health-giving property. But let me tell you, I'm going to go through some impact of the arts on human physiology, and I'm going to talk about how the arts impacts movement, which is the essence of life. When you're alive, you move. I'm going to talk about the arts impact on the relaxation response. I'm going to talk about arts as a means of self-discovery, which is more psychiatric. I'm going to talk about the arts therapies as a means to engage in creativity. I'm going to talk about the concept of pleasure and play, because in our society in the past, puritanical society in the past, it's as if pleasure was a sin. Well, we know that's not true. As long as the pleasures are responsible, pleasure can be a very important health-giving activity. And we're going to talk about the issue of the arts providing optimism and hope, which has been studied in medicine as well. And we're going to talk about, finally, we're going to talk about the arts as a spiritual path. And I'll try to not dwell on everything too long because we don't have all night. I want to give everyone in the audience here a chance to react to all of this stuff. But there are the 7 outcomes that I thought I would try to go through tonight. So let me tell you, the formal arts therapy movement began after World War II. Like so many issues in medicine or technology, wars tend to stimulate funding and technology and new developments in all disciplines, but in medicine, after World War II, now the term is post-traumatic stress syndrome. After World War II, the term that they used for soldiers coming back from the battlefield was shell-shocked. You're all familiar with that term. And because of the huge number of World War II veterans who had this shock condition, there was a recognition that maybe one of the ways that we could deal with some of these mental health issues in soldiers was through the arts. Basically in mental health settings. And the creative arts therapies to this day still emphasizes the mental health settings, but it's moved to all aspects of medicine. And I'll get to that in a few minutes. But there are currently more than 5,000 music therapists. I think that's US numbers. 10,200 dance therapists, 2,250 art therapists, and several hundred drama and poetry therapists, which is a smaller number. The arts therapy movement now includes more than 140 undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs. So you can get a degree in this field. At least 10 professional associations are in existence in various creative arts therapies, and several first-rate professional journals are being published, and there are periodic conferences. Now, all of our lives have been influenced by the so-called elephant in the room, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're putting that aside tonight, but that's sort of an elephant in all of our rooms. Hopefully it's coming to an end. But even there, I've been going online to see how the artists and musicians are reacting to the COVID pandemic. And there's a whole body of arts responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I'm going to take a minor deviation here. I'll just mention this for 1 minute. I think I would be remiss not to cite the recent hospital arts movement. It's not, this is placement of art and music in hospital settings, not meant to be therapeutic, but just meant to improve the environmental quality and the aesthetic quality of healthcare institutions. So when you go into a hospital lobby these days, more so than 20 years ago, you're more likely to see art hanging on the wall. Some hospital lobbies have pianists in their lobbies. You see a lot of this in cancer therapy settings. Aquariums are very popular in cancer therapy settings. So I just wanted to mention that these people are not placing art in healthcare settings, including rooms of hospital patients, for therapeutic purposes. They're simply trying to make the hospital experience a more pleasant one and a more aesthetic one. And there are several organizations who are leading that charge as well. I did want to mention, I already mentioned that the domination, the creative arts therapists tend to be found in mental health settings mostly, but they're starting to move into other specialties. And the ones, not surprisingly, where creative arts therapists are getting a foothold are pediatrics, and I'll explain that later, gerontology, which is older patients, oncology, cancer patients, physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is known as physiatry, and palliative medicine, death and dying. You know, clearly in those medical specialties, there's logic to be had as it relates to the value of creative arts therapy, more so than, let's say, surgery or family medicine, et cetera, et cetera. So let me talk about movement. Let me start out with the 7 outcomes of arts, creative arts therapies. So movement. If you dance, you dance, you're obvious. If you're alive, you're hopefully in one way or another moving. Even if it's the movement, even if you don't have movement of your muscles, your diaphragm is moving to allow you to breathe. So movement is sort of essential to life. When you pass away, one of the characteristics of you're not living anymore is that you're not moving at all. And movement obviously has been studied mostly in the arts therapy movement in the dance field. And if I had one prescription for each of you here tonight for longevity in your life, it would be dance twice a week at least. Dance is healthy for you. It's fun. It's seductive, well, in a nice way. And if there would be one prescription for me in arts and medicine, it would be to have you each dance for the rest of your life twice a week. Movement has been studied, for example, in the forearms of pianists. And when they play, obviously blood flow in pianists increases an average of 232% over basal state in the forearms. That's obvious. Their cardiac index rises 62% at the highest stages of piano playing. So vigorous piano playing, if you've watched it, is pretty good exercise. If you're playing an organ, it's even more exercise because you're using your feet and your arms more so. Singing. So-called belting or Ethel Merman Broadway singing have been analyzed through electromyography, measuring both intrinsic and extrinsic muscles associated with singing. This next statement is very important as it relates to movement. Many studies, and this is a very big in psychiatry these days, have demonstrated the antidepressant effect of musculoskeletal movement or exercise. Now, you don't have to have arts to stimulate that, but many people who do move in exercise use music-paced exercise. Maybe you do that yourself when you're walking or when you're running. And clearly, in addition to the miracles of antidepressant medications, psychotherapy, clearly movement has an antidepressant effect. Also, exercise and movement is probably, lifelong exercise and movement is probably safer than a lifelong commitment to pharmacotherapy, to drugs. So let's move on to the relaxation response and how the arts enhances that. So Herbert Benson, from Harvard, as you know, took a 1,000-year-old cultural meditation technique and he westernized it and he called it the relaxation response. And Herbert, when he wrote his book, didn't talk too much about the arts as a means to achieve relaxation, but clearly other authors have. And I've heard the phrase active meditation. So if you meditate to music, it's more active than clearly just a passive Herbert Benson-like relaxation response. John Diamond, an incredible genius music therapist, refers to active meditation as the royal yoga, the supreme meditation. So you may have heard of the in music, for example, there are 3 explanations for how music promotes a relaxation response. Biochemical theory states that music is a sensory stimulus that is processed through hearing. And the sound vibrations are transformed into neurological impulses that activate biochemical changes in the body, in the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. You may have heard the word entrainment. Entrainment theory suggests that oscillations produced by music are received by the human energy field and various physiological systems and organs entrain, or they match, or they go lockstep into the hertz or oscillation frequency of the music. So literally an organ in your body can entrain to a particular piece of music that you're listening to. And that can induce a highly relaxed state. That's one of the theories for why music has a relaxing effect on the human body, that a piece of music actually entrains to our entire human body or to even organs within the body. So I'm going to go on to the something called emotional catharsis. I had a debate when I visited Herbert Benson in Harvard. When I visited him one day talking about the relaxation response, I said, Herbert, for stress, what about the concept of stress release? And I actually wrote a paper on the topic. I listed among the stress releasing techniques, weeping, laughing, even the sexual response, orgasm. And clearly, if you think about it, music can certainly can stimulate weeping in people. That's well known. A tune that somehow, a piece of music that somehow they can relate to very emotionally can cause them to weep. Clearly, some music or some dance or even a piece of art can precipitate laughter. And clearly there are people who only want to have sex when a certain piece of music is playing. So even the sexual response, responsibly, of course, can be stimulated through the arts. I already mentioned that workers singing in the coal mines or singing in the cotton fields is a stress releasing technique. Let me move on to self-discovery.
Rick, by the way, this is fantastic. Okay, this is just wonderful.
Am I doing okay?
Everybody's loving it.
I apologize for looking at some papers, but
no,
thank you very much.
You're doing fantastically well. So just please go on.
Okay, good. A little bit better than last time. All right. Well, self-discovery. When you engage in the arts, it's a very obvious path to self-discovery, to learning about yourself. What you will discover as you engage in the arts is that you'll discover yourself. So if you start to draw a little bit, certain themes reoccur. That's you. That's you coming out on a piece of paper. Or if you start to compose a piece of music, certain themes might reoccur. And that's you discovering yourself. So the arts can really assist you with understanding who you are. Carl Rogers, you may know the name well. He was the developer of person-centered psychotherapy, incorporates the belief that each individual has worth, dignity, and the capacity for expression and self-direction. Noted sociologist Jean Houston describes the phrase entelechy, or the discovery and dynamic unfolding of your own essence, of who you are and who you are meant to be. The word is entelechy, or discovering the unfolding of your own essence and who you are and who you were meant to be. And it has long been known that the arts can play a key role in this self-discovery process. Natalie Rogers, whom I had an opportunity to know, she also passed. She's the daughter of Carl Rogers. She became a certified music therapist in California and obviously used her father's theories about psychology. But her basic practice over her career was music therapy. And Natalie, I spoke with Natalie at a conference once. I invited her to speak. She was wonderful. And she says, we express our inner feelings by creating outer forms. We express our inner feelings by creating outer forms. Most of us have unconsciously discovered some aspect of expressive arts as being helpful in our daily lives. One may doodle as one speaks on the telephone and find it to be very soothing. One might write or keep a personal journal and find that as you write this journal, feelings and ideas change, or perhaps even writing down one's dreams, and you can look for patterns and symbols. One might paint or sculpt as a hobby and realize that the intensity of the experience transports you from everyday problems. So the arts doesn't necessarily have to cure you, but it can temporarily give you solace and relaxation and self-discovery. I'm going to move to creativity. So when you engage in the arts, you're obviously, if you're actively engaging in the arts, remember you can passively engage in the arts by being in the audience or listening, or you can actively engage in the arts, which I prefer. So a gentleman named Tinnin, T-I-N-N-I-N, has written about the neurophysiology of the creative response. And he puts forth a theory of the aesthetic response that makes it extremely resistant to verbal analysis. And this is part of the problem in proving that the arts works, is that so much of the power of the arts is nonverbal that it's very difficult to and resistant to verbal analysis. Silvano Arietti, he defined creativity as the magic synthesis. So he took Freud's primary process and secondary process, and he added what is called a tertiary process. He built his theories on Freud's model of the mind as consisting of conscious and unconscious, but he added creativity as a third level of consciousness. A giant in this field is, and this is an important concept I'm about to articulate. I hope I can do it okay. His name is hard to pronounce, but Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, very famous author in the creativity field. He's most famous for the concept of flow. Now, what is flow? Csikszentmihalyi says flow is when your skills are in perfect harmony with the difficulty of the task. Your skills are in perfect harmony with the difficulty of the task. And you go into a timeless, placeless, active meditative state. When you're engaging in the arts, you go into a flow, which is neurologically has very salutary effects on your brain and on your human physiology. So that's an important concept, this concept of when you engage in the arts, and you probably have experienced this yourself, it's timeless. If you're in flow, if you're in true flow, it's timeless, it's placeless, and it's extremely relaxing. Hours can go by and you don't feel fatigue, according to some of the experts in flow theory. Now, one of my pleasures in my field of arts and medicine is that right after Bill Moyers won an Emmy for his series on alternative medicine, he invited me to his studios in New York. I think that's WNET in New York, the public television studio. And I had a wonderful day with Bill Moyers talking about the possibility of doing a series on arts and medicine. Well, we couldn't raise the money to do it, but I still have the script if anyone is interested in funding it. And Bill Moyers is still alive, as you know, but it was a wonderful day I spent with Bill Moyers. And he said to me, Rick, why are you so, what makes the arts so different from other therapies that we all know about? You know, the classical medical therapies like drugs and surgery, and the alternative therapies. And he had just won an Emmy for his series in alternative medicine. Bill Moyers did. And I said, I'll tell you, Bill, there's one aspect of the arts which really interests me, which the other therapies in medicine don't seem to address very much. And he said, well, what is that, Rick? And I said, it's pleasure. It is pleasure. And I wrote a paper in 1999, and I made the bold statement, engaging in responsible pleasures is the most underestimated source of health in our time. Engaging in responsible pleasures, not irresponsible pleasures, not shooting up drugs, not screwing your next door neighbor's wife. Engaging in responsible pleasures was the most understudied, underestimated source of health in our times. And clearly, and I said this to Moyers that day, clearly engaging in the arts, in addition to all of the medical benefits, is extremely pleasurable. There are some artists will tell you when they're painting, it's painful because the process is difficult for them. They have to redo the painting 300 times before they're happy with it. But generally speaking, if you are engaging in the arts, if you're singing, if you're playing music, if you're listening to music, if you're dancing, if you're sculpting, it's very pleasurable. And because of our puritanical culture, pleasure has not been part of the medical armamentarium in the past. It's been, how could something pleasurable be so therapeutic? No, medicine's supposed to taste bad. And it's supposed to be painful when you go to the doctor's office. But this is one of my arguments for the arts in medicine. And it's the concept of pleasure and play. Children, by the way, are natural artists because they don't have, pardon me, they don't have the problem with play. They don't have the shame associated with pleasure. It's a shame issue. For some reason, adults, as we grow, we feel shameful, and we even to the point that we deny our capacity to create something. Rollo May, the great psychoanalyst, whom I also met, also speaks about this issue of shame and the lack of shame in children. Hence why arts therapy is so successful in pediatric settings. Okay, I'm almost finished here. Let's see. I did say a lot. Optimism and hope. I'm speaking too long, I think.
Rick,
hope and optimism has been studied extensively, especially as the population ages. And we realize we're not going to be able to cure aging or cure death. We are studying the issue of how optimism might not necessarily cure cancer, but it makes the quality of the cancer patient's life more tolerable when you're optimistic and hopeful.
Rick,
and you all,
Rick, this is very good. So if you want, what we can do is that we can take a break, let people discuss, digest these ideas, and then we can go through your notes. You'll have time to go through your notes, and maybe if you want to add something after the breakout rooms, that would be great, because you put so many wonderful ideas on the table.
Okay. Let me just, before we do the breakout, let me just mention that you all know the anecdote about people living long enough to go to their son's or daughter's wedding. Or when they decide they want to die, they actually die, but they can extend their life through an optimistic or hope. And let me just mention, and I'll get back to this if we have time, but I do want to re-mention that there are special populations, and then we'll go to break if you don't mind. Pediatrics, I already mentioned, a very good population for arts therapists. Geriatrics, very important. You all know that they use the arts in nursing homes and rehabilitation facilities. AIDS, you all remember the famous AIDS quilt. In the early 1980s, that's when the AIDS epidemic became manifest. The AIDS community, for whatever sociological reason, became very interested in having arts help them. And the most famous of the outputs by the AIDS community was the AIDS Quilt project, which you all remember seeing. And then in death and dying, it's extremely important in that population, and I can talk about that later. It's extremely important for people who are dying to have the opportunity to, for example, leave their family an artistic expression of their life, and something that also eases their passing. So I'll stop with that, and thank you, Shrikant, for going to break, and you can introduce the break now, okay?
Absolutely. Rick, this was fantastic. And what I want to do is, I'm sure everybody has tons of questions, but what I'm going to do is that we're going to go to breakout rooms. We're going to discuss all these things amongst ourselves, bring together all the questions, all the takeaways, and then give them to Rick. For those who are
That's
new,
good.
Wonderful. So those who are new, I put the breakout room guidelines in our chat. Please allow everybody to talk for a couple of minutes about what they got, what are the big questions on their mind, so that all the thoughts are put on the table. And once that is done, we are going to then have a kind of free-flowing discussion. The rules are keep on topic. We're talking about art and medicine. Don't go too far off. Be brief. Lots of people have lots of interesting things to say, so let them say it. Be courteous. Encourage others to speak. And if needed, just click on ask for help and I'll help you. All right, folks. So we're going to do this for 20 minutes. The breakout rooms will run for 20 minutes. After which we'll come back here for, let me see here, 30, okay. After which we'll come back here automatically to, in this larger group, to continue our takeaways and questions. Use pen and paper to keep track of your questions. So the questions are the best questions, the most important question that's on your mind, all right? So organize your questions and ask the best question that you have. Starting the breakout rooms now.
So we had a really interesting discussion in our breakout room, and this is a really great presentation, by the way, Dr. Lippin. We talked about the idea, some of the distinctions between how art and dancing is different than just, say, exercise. It like invokes certain emotions, and how that is, it we did a whole series here how art can actually reach you in ways that other forms of communication really can't. So that was an interesting, it's not just say dancing and getting your body movement going, that there is a real distinction between the art and say something like an exercise. But one of the other interesting things that we discussed was the basically the tone level of how it impacts somebody's that is, say, you know, somebody's sensations, like it may be the vibrations and the level of vibrations in helping people that can't focus, for which I'm one, that focus, and that there is this, it's more about the vibrations and not necessarily the music itself. And that was something that where music has been used to work with people with focus issues. And it's an interesting thing because you don't know if it's necessarily the vibrations or the music itself. The last thing is how there's been a lot of crossover work that has been done between marketing and how they get people to actually purchase or do certain things using using the music and things like that. So there is behavioral evidence that, for not necessarily for health purposes, that it does work. But if you have anything to comment on for that, or anything that I said, feel free. But if not, just gonna move on to the next person.
Rick, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm not just, the questioner stimulated me to look into the vibrational issues versus the music. I'm not quite sure. I think I don't know how to answer that particular one. The issue of focusing, that seems very important to me because there are many people who are diagnosed with issues surrounding their capacity to focus. And I think the questioner said he's one of those people. And I have a little bit of a problem in that regard as well. Every performance review I've ever had is that I don't focus enough. But anyway, I'm not that familiar with the literature either on the capacity for the arts, either passive exposure to the arts or actively engaging in the arts can enhance focusing, other than what I said before about flow, where when you're in complete flow, your skills match the difficulty of the task, and it's a highly focused experience. As far as the power of the arts in marketing, that's huge. That is huge. That is huge. Generally, my guess is that I'm not a marketing expert either, but my guess is that image and music are much more important in marketing than the spoken word, for example. But when I think of like the power of the arts and how cultures have always known this, I think of, for example, a national flag. Think about the power that nations invest in displaying their flag or having people look at their flag, and the impact that that has on people's patriotism, the impact that a flag has on their ability to fight for their nation. So I think the arts. I read a quote once that only the arts has the power to match violence. Only the arts has the power to match violence. It's a very powerful statement, but I use this flag analogy not because I'm a lover of nationalism or flags, but it's a symbol. It's not words. It's a visual symbol, and it has the capacity to move nations. So when the questioner talked about the use of the arts in marketing, I think that's very well studied by marketers, and very successfully used. And you deserve a break today. I think Barry Manilow did a whole album on music relating to products. That was the McDonald's song. Okay. But so thank you for the question. What's your name, sir?
My name is Joe. And just to the point really quickly, it's just that if it can be used for something like marketing, that means it can be used for something good, like medical, treatment. And that was really one of the parallels that we were kind of drawing.
That's a very good comment.
Yeah.
If the marketers know how powerful it is, surely the doctors and nurses in the medical field should say, hey, maybe there's something to this. If it's so successful at selling things, maybe we can heal people with the same stimuli. Thank you. Very good analogy.
Wonderful.
Very good.
All right, Rick, lots of people have lots of questions. So it's going to be Barry, Roshan, Jean, Laura, Katie, Jack, Hugo, Judith, Elliot, and Kevin next. Barry, folks, keep your questions and comments short so we can go through as many. And Rick, you can talk as long as you want because everybody is just loving what you say. So Barry, what's your question or comment?
I have three comments. In my research of art therapy, because I really got into it after my wife died 7 years ago, I took up dancing, painting, poetry, yoga, piano playing, and drama. Wow. I took them all up, and I'm a polymath. So I do things. I don't do things 100%. I do them 120%. So anyway, this what I learned is there's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula cortex that is activated when you see somebody else having pain, or when you grieve, or when you stick yourself, and also this part of the brain is activated when you use a metaphor. And so when you have pleasure, this same part of the brain is activated, and it fools the brain to focus on pleasure rather than pain. And so it's all about meditation. The common thing with all these things, whether you're dancing, you're painting, your flow is really meditation. And I'll just leave you. And we had several people in our discussion that were professionals, and they found that the arts, as soon as they tried to make money for it, it was no longer pleasurable. It's because they were focusing on the results rather than the process. And I'll just leave you with one last point. My painting behind me is one I think I've shown before. It's a wine barrel lid, me painting Pinots in a wine, in a vineyard, and then it's got a faucet, and in it, there's wine coming out into a wine glass, and on that is my picture of myself. And it's this poem. It's 4 stanzas. Thine, take what is not mine, make what is mine divine, so that my meditation time ferments me into fine wine.
Very good. Very poetic. And thank you for showing your art behind you. I think what you said reinforces much of what we all learned tonight.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Roshan, Jean, and Laura. Roshan, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. This was an amazing talk. I was really looking for ways I could incorporate some relaxation time into my routine, and I was like, what's some things I can do? And this talk just placed right into what I wanted. So yeah, definitely 2 of my takeaways was being less shameful about taking time out for pleasure, and another is trying to be mindful of self-criticisms while creating art was something we spoke about, and that really hit me. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Roshan. Next up is going to be Jean, Laura, and Katie. Jean.
Yeah, great topic, Rick. So I have a question. So I was wondering, so I have two questions. One is I found the flow stage, and I actually got the book Flow. My experience, I experienced it when I was either doing drawing, or I was working, an architect working on the project, I fully get into it, or when I'm dancing or ski. So my conclusion is that the reason we feel that like timeless, placeless stage, because our mind, body, and soul actually at that point is all together. A lot of times it's kind of like they're separated. So it's when they all together, like you are high speed skiing, then you really don't separate. You have to concentrate on everything. Then everything actually together. Then you actually forgot, like when you're dancing, turning around, everything is blurry around you. Then you just become this like placeless space. Like it's kind of like you zoom out. The same as ski, like you ski super fast, and you're. I wonder if that's because that people feel that flow stage because of that moment you actually all together. Most moments we are not. I wonder what you thought on that.
I think what you said supports this concept of flow, the value of this concept of flow. And I think, it's very easy to Google what is flow, and you can study about it, but it's definitely a neurological state that's timeless and spaceless, active meditation. It's actually, according to the experts, extremely relaxing and health-giving, and you don't fatigue as quickly when you're in a state of flow. You can go on and on. By the way, I don't think it has to be the arts. It can be working, I think you mentioned work, or gardening. Some people love gardening. That's something I didn't talk about tonight. Horticulture therapy. When they're out in that garden, they really can get into a state of active meditation or flow. And it's another component of arts and therapy would be horticulture therapy. But I'm not so sure I answered your question. I think you were describing what we were talking about when we were talking about flow. Is that correct? Or did you have something more particular?
Yeah, just wonder if what's create the flow stage is because your body, your mind, and your spirit all together. So that's maybe why it's healthy, because the integrate human, that's a healthy stage. But a lot of time in the daily life, we separate, we think future and past, we are like worry about things. Our body and mind are not together.
Right. Correct.
Okay, next up is going to be Laura. Laura, what's your question?
Okay, try and make this as short as I can. I use art painting as my therapy. This painting is mine. And I think I probably want to know if you would consider my, God, I think I may have my own art therapy going. I don't paint with any intentionality. And so, but when I work sometimes, I try and do structured painting. And every time I do it, I hate it. And I take my brush and I go wildly over it. And I wind up saying, I can't paint something, I can only paint nothing. And that's when I can start my painting. And that's because that's the point at which I can actually get really absorbed in it and lost in it. And I can I can create something. And that's the time at which I can turn off my brain from thinking about the things that can be obsessive with me, which is my health. I'm dealing with 6 chronic conditions, both brain and physical. And, I can get very self-absorbed in that, which is not really a good place to be. And painting has been my salvation. And this is the way I make it work for me, myself, and it's my therapy. And I wonder, is it possible for a person to create their own kind of art therapy and it be successful?
Well, you already are successful, you said, right? I mean, first of all, thank you for showing this painting. I appreciate that. So I guess given the topic, we're having several of our participants showing us their art. And one person even sang for us in our breakout session. Yeah, I mean, I understand that if you have a chronic conditions, as you said, both neurologically and physically, that painting can be a refuge. I hate to use that word, it sounds too negative, but painting can be a source of healing for you, even if it's temporary. You know, was your question, can you be your own art therapist?
Yes, that was the question. Yeah.
Can you be, of course, you can be your own art therapist. You don't have to go for a degree in art therapy. You can be your own art therapist. And all you do is have to accept the fact that when you're creating, it's having a healing effect on you. And you have, by definition, become your own arts therapist. So thank you for bringing that into your life. And I wish you well with your conditions. And I hope that the arts can continue to play a role in helping you, even if it's temporary. It doesn't have to be permanent. It may not cure you, but it certainly could help you with your quality of life and help you cope with your medical conditions that you have. So thank you for showing us your art and telling us your story.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Next up is going to be Katie, Jack, Hugo, Judith, Elliot, Kevin, Shirley, and Kim. Katie, you're next.
Hello, I'm a nurse case manager and I work with oncology patients, and I definitely see how they would benefit from having like art therapy interventions, especially during long hospital stays. I just see a lot of barriers at my institution in terms of budget, infection prevention, precautions. So I was just wondering if you had any suggestions or examples of successful like inpatient art therapy programs.
Well, one trick, it's not, maybe I should use the word trick, but one technique that seems to have worked in some institutions is having a leader, whether it's a CEO of an oncology institution or a medical director or a nursing director, having a leader experience personally the impact of art when they themselves were sick, even with cancer. And having had that personal experience, maybe they would be more open to introducing probably a small project in their own institution. But you're right, it's a battle all the way. And medicine is still in the US for profit. And the bottom line still is very much with us, emphasis on the bottom line, high tech, high cost medicine for profit. And but my view is that that's unsustainable economically, that we're gonna have to move, like most of our peer nations have, toward a single payer model. And there have been some successes in other nations where there's not so much emphasis on the bottom line as we have in this country. They're the only ideas I can think of off the top of my head. I do think the oncology community is one of those special populations where the arts can more likely be looked at as an intervention. No one in their right mind would say it's ever going to replace chemotherapy or radiation therapy. And no one in their right mind would say if you let me come in here with my guitar, I can cure your ovarian cancer, or I can cure your prostate cancer. But I would have to guess that compared to other specialties in medicine, oncology is more ripe for breakthroughs in these areas than other specialties might be, for a lot of reasons.
Thank you, Rick. Next up is Jack, Hugo, and Judith. Jack, go ahead.
Well, Katie, you kind of stole my thunder because my question was very similar. My daughter is an art therapist at the University of New Mexico Hospital.
Oh.
Funding was often a problem, but she worked on the cancer ward, and she said she loved it there. And I went, oh my gosh, Jenny, that must be so sad. She goes, no, the people love making art. The patients as well as the family members that were there, they would just flock to her and make all kinds of art. But my other question, I have two more.
So is your daughter, let me just quickly ask, is your daughter's work valued and supported financially by the institution out there in New Mexico?
Yeah, they got grants, and I think it was from the university to do it for the university hospital. She has since left a year ago only because of the coronavirus, and she didn't want to keep having to go into the hospital, and she has a 5-year-old, and so she has she's doing something different now, but she had been working in the arts and medicine program for about 4 or 5 years. But my other question is what is the medical community, how do they feel, how are they accepting or not accepting arts and medicine as part of the medical process? Are they or aren't they? And then my third question is a personal one for you. Do you draw? And like I know you said you wrote poetry, but do you draw as well? Frederick Frank, I don't know if you know him, the Zen of Seeing. I mean, he's since passed away. He used to be a dentist, but he advocated drawing as, kind of like a Zen meditation kind of.
Yeah.
thing. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, personally, I don't draw. I do occasionally try to write some poetry, but I'm guilty, like some of the others here, that recently life has been so full that I haven't taken my own advice, even though I've spoken about it all over the world, of putting arts into my life. I mean, my wife and I and family and I love the arts, which has especially live arts. By the way, there's some studies that compare listening to music, electronic music, versus going to a live concert. And there's actually some scientific evidence that they're different experiences physiologically. But no, I don't draw. I once was sitting with a very famous sociologist, and I was sitting in a restaurant with him having coffee, and while he was talking, he was doodling. And I said, you mind my asking, why are you doing that? He says, I literally have to do this in order to enhance my verbal skills. It's like maybe people who say I can only study when I'm listening to music. Now, for me, music would get in the way of my capacity to study for an exam. But for others, they need the music literally to stimulate their brain, to do something to their central nervous system to allow them to study. I'm sorry, you asked me, first of all, I'm glad your daughter's succeeding out there. As far as is the medical community accepting this? I think I keep getting back to, we have had incredible success with biomedical reductionism for the last 100 years, mostly emphasizing pharmacology, surgery, maybe radiation. But I keep getting back to the notion that a large number of leaders in medicine, while they recognize that all of this has been miraculous and lives are saved every single day, by these wonderful technologies, biomedical reductionism is at best incomplete. It's not bad, but reductionistic medicine, drugs and surgery and radiation, it's incomplete. So what do I mean by that? So the models that are now emerging are biomedicine, psychological, sociological, and spiritual, BPSS, a bio, psycho, social, spiritual model of medicine. So the reductionists dominate medicine still. They dominate most of the governmental health agencies, but there are a growing number of experts in even the healthcare, governmental healthcare agencies and in leading hospital chains who are beginning to recognize that while biomedicine is excellent, it's incomplete. You need to pay attention to the psychological needs of the patient. You need to pay attention to the social needs of the patient. So zip code is as important as genetic code. You need to pay attention to the spiritual domain, the aspects of the patient. So what I think is emerging is in all of medicine, I may not live to see it, is this expanded model. And it doesn't reject Western mainstream biomedical reductionism. It leverages it. It adds to it by paying attention to these other needs that patients have. Patients have psychological needs, they have spiritual needs, and they have social needs. So to not recognize that socioeconomic factors are impacting health is ridiculous. If you turn on the news even today or tomorrow, you'll hear about the discrepancies between accessing the COVID vaccine because of socioeconomic status, because of race, because of where you live instead of who you are. Anyway, so I think we're on the cusp of some pretty major changes in medicine, and it's not a rejection of what's going on in the past. It's adding to it. It's leveraging it to be more comprehensive. Did I help with that answer?
Thank you. That was excellent. Next up is going to be Hugo, Judith, and Elliot. Hugo.
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant, and thanks for Dr. Lippin for this fascinating talk about art. I had a great opportunity during the breakout room to discuss with the breakout room teammates about art. You know, I learned a lot about pottery, marketing, design, the psychology of colors, as well as the state of flow. And my question is, I'm familiar with the book by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi about flow, but my question is, and it's, it was confused by the relationship between the challenge and the skills. It seems like the highest the challenge and the highest the skills lead to the state of flow. Can you, Dr. Lippin, speak more about this relationship, which seems like it's only reserved to people with high skill who face high challenges? How about people with low skill but still face high challenges and vice versa? If you can talk a little bit more about this relationship, appreciate it.
The key is not how challenging it is versus the skill that you have. The key is that the two need to match. The challenge that you engage in needs to match your skill. It can be low skill or high skill, low challenge or high challenge, but they need to meet up. If you're engaging in a challenge that is above your skill level, you're not going to achieve flow. If you are engaging, if you have a very high skill with very low challenge, like some people complain about their work, they're not challenged enough. If you have a very high skill level, but it's not challenged at the appropriate level, you're also not achieving flow. The concept with flow, as I understand it, is that, and there's a whole body of literature on this concept of flow, is that the two must meet, the two must match. When they match, you go into this active meditative state of timelessness and place and placelessness. Did I answer? Did I hope
let me add something. So it's very important to note that it has nothing to do with the level of your skill. You know, this flow is achievable at any level of skill. So consider that you have a certain level of ability, certain level of skill. If you try something that is just way too difficult for you, you'll be just frustrated. You won't be able to do anything. If you try something, if you keep doing something which is way too easy for you, you're going to get bored.
Very good.
You are not engaged. You're engaged
very good
when what you're trying to do is challenging. So that means that it is like you are at the edge of your capacity, whereas if you stretch a little bit, you can do it. And that stretching doesn't break you. It doesn't break your, ability, and you grow a little bit. So it has to be within the range. So think of it as like these two axes over here, and this is your skill. Doesn't matter what level it is. You have to operate kind of on either side of it. It has to have level of challenge and with enough level of comfort. Hugo, does that?
Shrikant, that was terrific. You have to do the next presentation on flow. That's very good. I like the stretch concept. I like the stretch concept because it's a worthy concept.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rick. Next up is going to be Judith, Elliot, and Kevin. Judith.
Yeah, just to pick up on that part there, like I like to draw and I like to paint, but like I'm not skilled I'm okay, but I don't do it very often, and I don't do it because it's like a project in my mind, like, oh, now I have to get these things together, now I have to make time for it. But on those rare occasions when I do, I get into flow, like the time just goes by and like I forget, all of a sudden it's like, 3 hours have gone by and it feels like 5 minutes or something, or I've been so concentrated, I just haven't paid attention to the fact that it's been 3 hours. So I definitely think, flow, but it seems like painting is like something that I could get into flow, but I do all kinds of art therapy apparently on myself because I dance to relieve stress. And I don't think of it that way, but that's actually, when I look back on it, that's what it is. I just like feel like dancing. And then I realize that like, I'm just releasing all this stuff that I have inside myself. And that's why it feels so good. So it happens quite spontaneously. It can happen in the middle of the night if I'm not sleeping, and I'm like, wow, I've been thinking for about 20 minutes here. Maybe I'll just get up and dance for a while. So then I'll just do that. And then I go back to sleep really well. But that's my thing. Dancing is my favorite thing. But I also like play, and I also was thinking like my father, he would whistle when he was tense and very late in his life. If there was some very stressful conversation or ideas in his mind, I noticed he'd be doing the dishes and he'd just be whistling. It sounded really peaceful, but I knew he was like processing stuff in his own way. And my mother had Alzheimer's, and if you played classical music, she would light up and become a different person and like conduct the music, So I'm like all on board on this art therapy thing. It's way better than medication for sure. But it brings you to the present too. So like if you have concerns, all these things like bring you to the moment of something that's joyful, So I think though that in our culture, adults don't go to that source very readily. And I wonder if it's because we're kind of segregated. So by the time you're an adult and your kids are, if you've raised kids, you know, and they're off on their own, you know, unless you're a grandparent with your grandchildren, you don't, then you might actually have an opportunity to know what it feels like to play. You've seen grandparents play with their children, you know, so I feel like that's really healthy for people to have that. So if you are, you know, not in childhood anymore or not with children anymore, I think you should just try to access that. I mean, I do that with my 20-year-old, something-year-old. I'll be like, oh, it's pouring rain, it's midnight, let's go walk in the rain, you know, in the middle of the summer. Just something very spontaneous that brings you to the present, and it's good for your mental health is what I think. So my question is there, that we're talking about different types of art, is there certain types of art are better suited for a specific thing that you want to address, like a stress release? I would think maybe dance, if talking about myself. Painting seems more meditative. I wonder if there have been studies that say, well, you know, this might be suitable for what you need right now.
Thank you, Judith. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, fascinating set of comments there. And you ended with a question, which I'm not sure I can answer. I really love the concept that you mentioned, that when children are out of your life, you tend to forget how to play, which is real, but sort of tragic. You know, I think Wordsworth bemoaned the famous line, "As the child is father of the man." I mean, we lose our innocence, we lose our capacity to play as we get older. And it is brought out more when you're around children. There's no doubt about it.
Wonderful.
They don't have to be your grandchildren, but they can be children that somehow you can volunteer to interact with. But thank you for that. As far as particular arts, you know, being prescribed for particular medical conditions, to me, I'm sure there's a body of literature on that. For example, you know, there are certain medical conditions that the doctor will actually prescribe movement. There are certain neurological conditions, and there are certain other medical conditions, musculoskeletal conditions, where movement is thought of having value. And so movement, when I think of movement, it can be either mostly dance, but it could also be playing an instrument where you have to move your arms or legs, but mostly dance. As far as music seems to be prescribed in a lot of geriatric facilities, because music seems to be able to access parts of the brain in geriatric patients with dementia better than other artistic stimuli. So you probably have seen that in nursing homes, or maybe you've read about it in the literature. But I see a lot of music therapy in geriatric populations, especially those with dementia. They're the two that come to the top. Stress release, you know, clay, you know, they talk about giving hyperactive children silly putty or clay to work with, because when they forcefully use their hands or doing pottery, somehow the act of getting into that material can relieve stress. So I've seen some of that in the literature, but there probably is a body of literature. If you would ask the question, what particular art therapy is most suitable for what conditions? And you can look at dance, the visual arts, painting, music, poetry, horticulture, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the best I can do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Next up is Elliot. Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant, and thank you, Dr. Lippin. This is super interesting. I love all the horticulture reference. I was doing a little gardening today, very, very therapeutic. And,
oh, nice.
I like the theme of just using kind of play and pleasure and art to help our mental health and our physical health as well. I was wondering, I had a question that, a lot of people seek out medicine and therapy proactively when they know that they need, treatment. But as you can assume, and as we know, a lot of people also don't seek that out, whether it's because they don't realize that they can get help, or they can't afford it, or they just forget, or they're, just not on top of their priority list. Or there's a good chance that they don't know the benefits of this type of medicine. So I was wondering if you know, and if you've seen what type of strategies have been successful in convincing people to adopt this type of art therapy on their own, if not, going to treatment centers or specialists.
Good question. I mean, I think the creative arts therapy community, the professional associations have asked themselves that quite a bit. How do we market ourselves, and how do we make patients even aware that this exists? So I would go to the professional associations, and if you give me your email address, I can give you the names of the associations. There's art therapy associations, music therapy associations, poetry and drama therapy associations, dance therapy associations. And, they spend a lot of their time, because they want to see their people get jobs. They spend a lot of their time trying to figure out how to market their skills, not only to people who might foot the bill, but to the patients. And there's a cliche in alternative medicine, and that is the patients are way ahead of their providers. So in these areas, so if you go to your family doctor, unless he or she has had a particular personal experience with this, or maybe has a child like one of our attendees tonight who's doing it, you go to your personal doctor, it's very unlikely that your personal doctor is going to get away from talking about cholesterol and blood in your stool and start to talk about why don't you get some music therapy along with your medicine that I'm about to prescribe to you. But the patients themselves, in my opinion, are ahead of their own providers in regard to being sensitive to these therapies and aware of them. Sometimes they're afraid to bring them up to their own doctors when they interact with them, because they feel like the doctor is going to be dismissive or even angry toward them for even promoting the notion that art can possibly be better than a drug that I'm about to prescribe to you. But I don't know, other than to say that it's an ongoing struggle for these communities to get leaders to acknowledge the value of what they're doing. And I think the better strategy, which I think you were suggesting, is actually to work the marketing from the bottom up. Let the patients become aware of this, and then let the patients raise this when they're in the hospital. Hey, I'm laying here for the next 4 days after my gallbladder was taken out. Hey, do you happen to have a music therapist on your staff that might come in? Or hey, how about putting a painting? Hospitals do have art carts. I'd like to see, as a patient, I'd like to see a piece of art hanging in my room. Can you bring me an art cart and show me what I can hang up? Hospitals are doing this, not because they think that a piece of art will cure cancer, but it will certainly make your hospitalization a more enriching experience and possibly have positive medical outcome more likely. So I don't know. I guess I'll just repeat my view is that getting patients to be aware of this is almost more as important as getting the providers to be aware of it. Okay, and let the patients stimulate the providers and make their demands.
Wonderful, folks.
What?
No, I just want to let everybody know that if you're not familiar with our meetups, we do these meetups every day, and we do about 4 to 6 meetups on the weekend. I just want to tell you briefly about the meetups coming up this weekend. On Saturday at 12 o'clock, we're going to be, Dr. Brian McVeigh will be here. He'll be talking about metaphors and how they shape our thinking and our language. At 2:30, we're going to be talking about Louis Sullivan and his take on art. He's the guy who formulated form follows function. And at 5 o'clock, Chuck Spinney and Chet Richards, who are associates of John Boyd, they are going to be here talking about the OODA loop. That's going to be an incredible presentation. On Sunday at 2:30, we're going to be talking about nonviolent communication and its relationship with Jungian psychology. And at 5 o'clock, renowned Jungian psychologist John Beebe will be here talking about archetypes and psychological functions. And all of that is at this 52 Living Ideas, which the link that I put in. All right, and next up is going to be Shirley, Kevin, Kim, and Mike. Firstly, Rick, how are you doing? Can you take 4 questions?
Yeah, I do. I want to leave with some 1 minute of closing comments.
Oh, you can take as much as a closing. I just wanted to make sure you're okay.
We might get shut off at 11, but I'll be happy to take more questions.
Okay. No, I didn't. No, there is no time limit. So I just want to.
I have some messages.
Messages
to close out.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely. I'll give you time. Just want to make sure that you're not too tired. Because Rick, this is fantastic. Okay. I want you to have.
You're too kind.
No. I want you to come back because this is such an important topic. Well, see the reaction of everybody. All right. Next up is Shirley. Shirley, go ahead.
Okay. All right. First of all, I want to say thank you. Second, I want to just have a comment, not a question. Something that I'm aware of that some hospitals are taking, or med schools are bringing the new students in to a museum so that they can have a lecture or they can have some training in the arts. And I think
that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to put that out because it wasn't mentioned.
And that's going on. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Arts and medical education is growing. Mm-hmm. Yes. They're taking medical students to museums, to concerts. Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. That's another aspect of arts and medicine that I'm interested in, how it can be applied to medical education, the arts.
Wonderful. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, what's your question? Folks, let's keep the questions short so we have got good time to do closing. Kevin.
Okay, I can keep my question short. Last meetup, I got a message from Rick. It's how important relationship to our house. How the relationship with home, family, and the workplace. For me, plus nature. And my question is about this. As a child, we have lots of power to connect to nature, and we don't need art of as healing. Everything is art. And since we grow, we kind of lost those ability to connect to the outside world. So my question, do you have any thought about this? Why we lost those power, which we have had a childhood? And do you have any research furthermore investigate why, if you say just now the child is the father of the man, we kind of like, who is the child, we still call the dad is, the father. So it doesn't make sense. And thank you. I'm gonna stop here.
Shrikant,
yes.
Shrikant, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear the question.
So the question is, as children, art comes naturally to us. We engage in every kind of art in the most natural way. But as adults, most people don't. So why is that? What is it that we lose? How can we learn to be like children in this respect?
It's an extremely important question, and all I would say is that wise educators know that to remove arts from curriculum, whether it's kindergarten through high school, through graduate schools, really understand the value of who understand the value of the arts, and recognize the fact that the loss of that capacity for creativity is probably in the end catastrophic for a culture. And it's not that I'm an anti-technology Luddite, but I don't know. I mean, the greatest minds in psychiatry and in education have thought about this question of why we can't hold on to that capacity to be creative throughout our entire lives. And maybe part of it has to do with making sure that that type of creative impulse doesn't get snuffed out by our education system. That's one answer.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you. Next up is question from Kim, but I'm going to read it out. I'm going to paraphrase it. She asks, there are some arts that you are comfortable with, that speak naturally to you, and some arts which are difficult for you. What is the advantage? Would you recommend going with arts that you are already kind of very comfortable with, which speak to you more, or would you? What is the advantage of using arts which you're not familiar with? What would you recommend?
Excellent. Well, it reminds me of your comment, Shrikant, about stretching yourself. When we were talking about flow, and I would say both. I mean, I would say if you're comfortable with a certain art form, certainly don't give it up. But there's nothing wrong if you have a little bit of extra energy or time on your hands to stretch yourself and try something that's a little bit challenging, and you might grow. And again, avoid the self-critical thinking, the shameful thinking. You don't have to show it to anybody. You don't have to share it with anybody, although I think that's nice if you can. You can engage in. I will tell you right now, when somebody says to me, I can't sing, or I can't dance, or I can't paint, I say to them, yes, you can. Change the word can to won't. I won't sing. I won't dance. I won't paint. So I reject the notion that any of us on this call can't do these things at some level. You may not be a Picasso. You may not be a Nuri Evan dance. You may not be a Bach or a Beethoven, but surely you can sing, you can dance, you can paint at your own level, and you can enjoy it as an activity without harsh criticism.
Thank you. Next up is Mike. Mike, it's late. Can you ask a short question? Mike, are you there?
Maybe. Maybe this is something I'll set the predicate that maybe we can think about it for you. You should come back again. Everybody wants
definitely. I'm everybody just, I think this topic is so rich. It's so rich, and there is so much to be said about it. And I think we've just looked at, this is just an introduction. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, you've used 45 seconds of my 30 seconds. So
that time has been ceded back to you, sir.
All right, yield the time back to me. I have an idea, which is not mine, and I want your help to tie all these things together, all these different protocols. This flow guy, Mihaly, came up with he wasn't a flow guy.
Mike,
He's
Mike, please keep it short, okay?
Short. It's
Just
short.
keep it short. Yeah.
He's 90 years old, and he started out as a positive psychology guy, because if you really want to die an unpleasant death or succumb to cancer, you need negative thinking. And he came up with a number of devices for positive thinking, including prayer, meditation, art, and exercise.
Mike, go ahead and put your question up now.
Okay, I'm looking for a thread, and I'm using the flow guy as the basis of this, as to how they're tied together. And it's basically a number of different devices to get the guy off the wall, so he doesn't, or woman off the wall, so he's not thinking about how horrible life is. And that can change his immune system and a whole list of things. So he can get remission from cancer if his immune system, and he can get a cure from depression if he gets those.
Okay. All right, Mike, it's too long, please.
All right, I can wrap up a little more, but it's already, you already got the idea, I think. And there is in me Ali's work, there is a seed for how to tie all these together. And I'll add one more thing. People did the sacred material was read out loud, and it was read with music. And there's if you look at an original edition of the Bible, there's notes called a trope that's in the upper left-hand corner, in the upper corner of each word, as to how you sing it. There's commentary on what all that means.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Rick, would you like to respond? Let me go ahead.
I picked up on the. I did not know that the Bible has. You say they have musical notes on the pages of the Bible. That interests me. I wasn't quite following everything that Mike was trying to say there. And go ahead.
Yeah, see, Mike is our he's our resident historian and gadfly, and he has this encyclopedic knowledge, and we have to always manage kind of. But let me take it from another angle, because see, I didn't get to ask you anything, so I'm going to talk about this. We did this entire series on art and the importance of art. We also studied mythology through Jung, so that kind of relates to what Mike was saying. But art is very powerful. You know, if you just look at art at its best, at its deepest, it actually concretizes your philosophy, your view of life, of what is important in life. It is a way of focusing on what you think is the most important thing in life in a very concrete way. So it is kind of philosophy concretized. It is your morality concretized. It is your values concretized. So when you are doing art, or when you are experiencing art, even when you're, and this is particularly powerful when you're doing art, you are actually engaging all your values, everything that means anything to you. And what it does is that it brings forth, because you're doing that, it brings forth all the connections between your spirit, your psychology, your mind, your body, and all of it gets united. That's what Jean was trying to talk about, that all of these things kind of come together, and that lifts everything. It lifts your body. It lifts your psyche. It lifts your mind. It lifts your spirit all at once. And that's what art can do at its best. And you add a little bit of that to any moment of your life. It lightens it up. It makes it shine. It lifts all the burdens that are there, because you see the larger picture, wider picture. You connect to things that are important to you. And that has tremendous value, tremendous value. So it's a way, your theme of art as a healing agent is actually demonstrating the integrity of a human being, that we are one being. All these are aspects of us. And when you're doing art, all of these things come together and they support each other because they're living things. Your body is recharged. Your emotions are recharged. Your mind becomes more active. Your spirit lifts all together. So I think that's what art does. What do you think?
Excellent. I mean, very well said, and very profound and very important. It reminds me of another name in the field, and that's Rollo May. I went to, the art therapies have organizations. But I went to, in 1990, he gave the keynote address at the National Coalition of all the art therapies, and it was in Washington, DC. And he's an existential psychologist, as you know, but he's very interested in what you just said, Shrikant. And he wrote a book called The Courage to Create and many other books, Love and Will. Rollo May. This is what he said when he keynoted this conference. He said, "You art therapists are the harbingers or sparks of a new world that's about to be born. A new religion," he said. This is Rollo May, a new religion based on man's endless search for beauty. And maybe that's partially what you're driving at. As creativity in part is a search for beauty in the world and the joy of human beings helping other human beings. That's the morality part that you talked about. But this was a wonderful speech that he gave in 1990 to all the arts therapists. Thank you for the summary, Shrikant, and reminding me that I heard Rollo May speak at that particular conference. I'd like to close with two quotes for you. And thank you all for participating tonight, Shrikant, especially for helping with hosting and with the technology issues, where I'm weak, by the way. But one is a quote, and it talks to the issue of, you don't have to be an expert to be involved in the arts. You don't have to be a renowned artist or musician or dancer. Judith Cornell talks about the democratization of the arts. And she said, the new image of humanity emerging in our century is that of a divine artist in everyone. Everyone. The new image of humanity emerging in our century is that each of you can manifest the divine artist within you. That's a democratization of the arts, and says that each of you is an excellent artist. The final one is from Alan Alda, who's an actor, very famous actor, who was most notably known for his role in MASH, the television series. And Alda said this. Alan Alda said this, and I give this to you as something that you should think about, and a reason for why you need to put more arts into your life. The creative is a place where no one has ever been. It's risky. The creative is a place where no one has ever been. What you will discover will be wonderful, because what you will discover will be yourself. So by engaging in the arts, you will discover the greatest gift there is, and that is discovery of yourself. So I'll leave you with that from Alan Alda, the actor. So thank you very much, Shrikant and others. And I hope I can come back. I have some practical issues I have to face over the next 6 months, but I'll give it a try.
Absolutely.
If anyone needs my email address, I'll try to communicate with you. I'm not shy about I'm a very good networker, and if you need some references to some of the things I've said tonight, some studies, some websites, I have a lot of those.
You can go ahead and put it in the chat if you want, Rick, or do you want me to go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. So give me just a second. This is fantastic. Give me just a second. I need to find it. Folks, hold on for just a second. Let me just give you the email address. Okay, it is, okay, just a second.
Lippin at AOL.com.
At AOL.
I have gray hair. I still use AOL. I have gray hair and I still use AOL, but we're trying to move to Gmail.
Okay. Excellent. So Rick, this was just incredible. I mean, firstly, the topic is so important because it's the mind-body integration in the most powerful way. Second is I thought you did a fantastic job of it. And it's really, I mean, it's very clear that on each of the points you could have gone on for a long time. And I saw how everybody reacted, their questions, their comments, and I think you've added something to each of our lives. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful, sir. All right, sir.
Thank you. And I wanted to especially thank those individuals who actually showed their art on this get together, on this meetup. And we even had one person sing us a song from our native Indian country. So we're getting there. We're getting there. It's not all about pills and surgery. Okay.
Oh, wonderful. I see Jack showing his drawings. Wonderful.
Yes.
All right. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Good night and hope to see you folks soon. Bye.